So let's move on to section 9, and here I would be talking about lean tools, right. So till from section 1 to section 8 we were discussing about the fundamental concepts of Lean Six Sigma. Okay, we knew about its history, how it evolved, and what are the various perspectives. So I believe now that you have enough knowledge that you understand what is Lean and Six Sigma, and even you can just now try to start implementing it. But to implement Lean or Six Sigma, you need to have knowledge of some of those tools and techniques, fine. So from now onwards, from section 9 till section 12 or 13, I don't know where exactly I am going to put a stop, fine. So we would be talking about lean tools, we would be talking about DMAC, DMAV, right, not in the sense that I will teach you to the level of the black belt, but you will have the knowledge of those things, fine. And then we will be talking about PDCA, continuous improvement. So I would be discussing all these topics in such a way that they will enable you, that you can start working on them, that you can start implementing these tools, and only when you can do that, you are an asset. Whether it's your own business, whether you are going for a startup, whether you are a part of a team. So my only perspective and my only endeavor is to impart you with the knowledge that makes you an asset, right? So in section 9, as I told you that I would be talking about lean tools, so I have here just mentioned all the lean tools which I am going to discuss. So each one would be a lecture in itself. The first one is not lean tool, actually it's fluctuations. So by now you understand that we do have fluctuations. Either you can call fluctuations, you can call variation when we talk about Six Sigma. So fluctuations, variations is part of our system, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's services, whatever you are doing, and this is the basic reason we need some techniques like Lean, Six Sigma, so that we can control these fluctuations, which results in defects and waste, right. So here when I would be talking about fluctuations, I would be just discussing what basically fluctuations are and how we can decouple fluctuations. And then the tools I'll just go through in this section, I'll just read them through. The first one would be Anden, then Gamba, then Hijinka, then Hoshin Kanri, Jidoka, Just in Time, Kaizen, Overall Equipment Effectiveness, SMED, Standard Work, Takt Time, Theory of Constraint, Total Productive Maintenance, Visual Factory, Small Lot Production, and Pocoyoke. So I would be taking up, as I told you, that each one would be a lecture in itself, and I would try to cover as much knowledge as is required for you, because since you're just starting off, it's a white belt, but still the knowledge you will gain would be higher than what ordinary white belts would know. I would try to bring in that kind of knowledge, kind of a practical knowledge, so that you can start implementing these. You understand, if you're already working and these tools are being used, so you will understand how they work and you can also start working on them. So coming back to the first topic, that is fluctuations. So you know, we are surrounded by fluctuations. You can name it as fluctuation, you can say it variation, and it can be from anywhere. Now your suppliers can be late, your customer orders can be like more or less. So there are always fluctuations in our systems. As I already told you, whether it's manufacturing, it's not only that it's manufacturing, so we have to have all these fluctuations, or it's services, so fluctuations are there. And we need to control these fluctuations so that whatever we are doing, whether it's we are producing something, we are offering some kind of services, they just fit in the requirements, whatever suggested requirements are by the customer, whatever requirements are, fine. So the bottom line is, the less the fluctuation, the more efficient the system is. So this means if you can just control these fluctuations, your systems would be efficient, you would be better able to provide better services to the customer, you would be better able to meet your customer requirements or whatever requirements are. So here I am just quoting Toyota because Toyota has like become a symbol of quality. So Toyota puts in enormous efforts to control fluctuation, but even they have fluctuation. So this means that this is something which is there, and that's why we need systems to control these. That's why we would be needing these tools. That's why we use Six Sigma techniques like DMAC, DMAV, just to control these things. Why we need continuous improvement? If we have just made improvements in our system, then why do we need PDCA, something like continuous improvement? Like we need to continuously improve. We have improved the thing, so it should be working fine. No, we need continuous improvement because of these fluctuations. So I hope you understand that why I took up this topic before I just took other lean tools. So talking about sources of fluctuation, so fluctuations can come from everywhere. I have already mentioned that they can come from any source. It can be your supplier, it can be the way your processes work, it can be customers. So example, your supplier could be early or late, bring too much or too little, both the cases that would lead to fluctuation. Or the quality could be good of the suppliers, or it could be bad. And then customers are known for random behavior as well. So we cannot control that what they order for, such as ordering more or less, cancelling an existing order, changing quantities, moving delivery dates forward or back. So this is what these are the sources of fluctuation. So it's not always that the outside factors would bring in fluctuations, like we were talking about the suppliers, the customers. So we even have these sources within our processes, within our systems. So systems are also responsible for fluctuations, like machines may be fast or slower than usual, or there can be a breakdown, fine. Your operators may not be trained, so they don't know how to operate it properly, or they may not be well, they are off duty. So there is no standardized work procedure. So this is one of the things which causes a lot of fluctuation. So fluctuations can be of many types, like material flow, quality, profits, there are many, right? So there are certain ways to decouple fluctuations. When I use this word decouple fluctuations, what exactly I mean is that how we can separate these fluctuations from our processes so that we can make them more effective, right? So there are three fundamental ways to decouple fluctuations, and these ways are inventory, capacity and time. Now each one has its own advantages and disadvantages, fine. So we use a mix of these. I'll be going through each of them, so you will understand that each one has their own pros and cons. So what ideal thing is that we should understand that what is our situation, what are the major sources of fluctuation within our processes, our systems, and then get a right mix of these three, so that they can come together as a force and we can decouple the fluctuations, right? So coming first thing, like the first thing, whenever you think about decoupling fluctuations, now as I told you what decoupling actually means is, so I would be using this term again. So whenever we talk about decoupling fluctuations, the first thing that comes to the mind is inventory. The first question when we talk about inventory, because you think it's very easy, you can hoard, like you can just get lots of raw material in case it's required, or you can just stock the products which are finished, you can stock them up. So inventory is something which is an easy solution. When we talk about inventory, the first question that comes to our mind is that if we really need to stable our processes, we need to get rid of the fluctuations, and we are thinking about inventory, that maybe inventory can help us. So the first question that comes to our mind is that how long does it last? Like if do we have an inventory for 1 month, for 6 months, for a week, for 1 day? So basically this is what the question we ask ourselves. Probably the first thing most people think of when considering decoupling fluctuations is inventory, and the common solution whenever we talk about inventory, the common solution is add buffer stock between your processes. That is, buffer stock means having extra raw materials or extra things between your processes. So, if you temporarily need more than what you can produce, take parts out of the inventory, and if you temporarily produce more than you need, you increase your buffer stock. So, this thing seems to be very simple, but as we have already discussed in the waste of inventory, I have talked it in terms of waste as a MUDA in manufacturing, and I even discussed it in inventory. So, it is not such an easy way to go forward, right? So, it is easiest way to decouple fluctuations to a normal mind. But a lean practitioner, a person who understands lean, he understands it clearly that inventory has its pros and cons. So, you can add it pretty much between every process to buffer fluctuations. You can just control the fluctuations by adding on inventory between the processes, making it a very popular method. But we need to discuss that is actually inventory a good way, and how we should control inventory so that it does not lead to waste and further variations. So, when we talk about inventory, that we can use it to decouple fluctuations, as I already told you, and we have already discussed about inventory in MUDA and even how inventory affects in the service sector, right. So, you know that it is not that easier task to do. So, there are certain downsides of inventory. The first one is the cost of inventory, right. This is the major reason why we cannot say that inventory is one of the best ways to decouple fluctuation. So, traditional cost accounting looks primarily just at the cost of capital, that what you have invested in buying that kind of inventory. So, this is what traditional cost accounting does, and this was the basic failure, that why people couldn't understand that inventory was just making them lose their money, and they were not the profits were not going there to the bottom line. But this is only a small part of the overall cost. If you see the cost of inventory, it's huge. By now I believe you understand that the cost of inventory is not just the cost at which we buy that thing, okay, or if we have just made up some things, we have made the finished products. It's not just the cost about those products, there are other costs involved too, and they are huge. So, there are other costs like insurance, handling, administration, defects, deterioration, increased lead time, and many of them cannot be calculated like to the T. So, the cost accounting leaves them out, and due to which companies think that it's okay that we can just go overboard with inventory and then we can just decouple fluctuation. So, overall you can expect to pay between 30 to 65% of material value per year just for privilege of having the material. Now, do you think that this percentage is good enough to decouple fluctuation when you're paying so much, when there are better ways maybe to do that or better things to do that? This is why we need the techniques like Lean, Six Sigma. We use various other tools so that we can keep those fluctuations under control. Inventory can cover fluctuations around the mean demand, but not long term changes. So, you can have inventory just to have, like, you can just control the demand for a time being. You cannot control for a long time. I just explain why. For example, if your customer demands are continuously increasing, right, so eventually you will end up with having no inventory. And in same case, vice versa, if your customer demand is gradually decreasing, so what is the actual scenario is, I will just tell you that you will be your inventory would explode. It would be everywhere in form of raw material, in form of finished goods. So that's why we cannot say that inventory is one of the best ways to control fluctuation, decouple fluctuation. It is one of the ways which we can use choose for, like, with a limited option, like it's not one of the complete solution in itself. Then coming to capacity. Now this is another method, fine. So there is fluctuation, just add up more machines, add up more men and control this fluctuation. So this seems so simple, right? But this is also again like inventory, it has its downsides, it has its pros, it has its cons. If customer wants more, just ramp up working hours, increase your working hours, produce more, so the fluctuation is under control, right? And if the customer wants less, stop the machines, ask your employees to go home. So do you think this is as simple as it looks like? No, because the problem is only few operators are willing to be called in a moment's notice and sent home later. Even if you are a worker, just think that if your just company calls you up and asks you that you are just you're here for 1 hour and after doing the work you can go home. So this doesn't sound like a very good idea. Problem with adjusting capacity is the delay between the decision to increase or reduce capacity and the actual increased or reduced capacity. So there is this time gap, the decision you take and actually when it happens. For example, in most of the European companies, like they have, like some companies can take weeks time. So they give weeks advance notice to the people operators, so that they can tell them that, you know what, you will have to work extra hours, or you need to just slow down on your work and you have to just leave early, or some may take up to months time. So this is just a particular example of the European companies, right? But the problem is that again this depends upon the operator's will, the people who are actually working. You cannot force them that they have to work more or they have to work less. So when we talk about capacity, so if you need larger increases, like you need to produce more than actually what you are doing, so you need to just hire more people, but this would take time. So if you think that you just need more production or more production lots, maybe after 1 week, so if you start hiring today, it won't show any results, it would take time. So and it takes a lot of time when actually you hire new people. It's a process which takes months time. And for example, if you need to install new custom made set of machines, and so it also takes time up to 6 months. So because first you need to order those machines, you have to have specific parts, so it can't be done like this, you know, that takes time. That's why when we talk about capacity, time is a constraint. You take a decision and then the actual result comes, so that has some time gap. So are you ready, or your customers are ready for that kind of fluctuation? This is the question you need to answer. So just think of time you need to build a plant. So if there's a demand now and you have to build a whole new plant, so you yourself can imagine how much time it would take. So similarly, if you have to reduce capacity, that also takes time. If I have to give you a very simple example, you need to reduce capacity. So the first thing is that you can just fire few of your employees. But it's not that simple, because you know there are some notice periods you have to give to your employees. Only then, whatever the law states, whatever your law is, the labor laws are, so according to that you can fire. So it's not that you decide today that we have to reduce the capacity and you can do it tomorrow. So no, you can't even fire people on immediate notice until and unless they have done something on the basis of which you can fire them. And even same is the case with getting rid of old machinery. Yes, you can sell off the machinery, old machinery, but if you're doing so on a very quick notice, what usually happens is that the price you get is like a lot less than you actually sell it when you think about it and you find out the right buyer for that machine. But when we compare this thing with inventory, that is when we compare inventory with capacity. So there are two things. When we talk about inventory, you actually only create a pile of finished goods at one spot at the end of the value chain. Either you are having lot of raw materials in the beginning of the supply chain, or you are just having lot of finished goods at the end of the value chain. But the thing with capacity is that, however, you need to adjust the entire value chain up to the new capacity. Fine. So you have to just adjust your entire value chain. That should be working accordingly. For example, if you've increased the capacity of all the processes and by chance you have just left one of the processes, so again what would happen is that your entire production will be only according to the bottleneck process. Now that bottleneck process, what is this? We will understand it in the theory of constraints, right? So also bottleneck can also be your supplier. Now it's not only your process that you've just left out some process and that's why now your production is less, your capacity is less. It can also be your supplier. Now your supplier may not be ready to just give you supplies according to, if you are asking for increased demand, he may not have that kind of resources to increase the demand on such a quick notice. So that the bottlenecks can also be from the outside. Now the pros, when we are talking about capacity, so there are some good things also when we talk about capacity. So what are those? That's why we have taken this to decouple fluctuation. If it had so many bad things, so why would we actually think of it as one of the ways to decouple fluctuation? So the pros are changes in capacity may be cheaper than by increasing inventory, because if you ask your operators to maybe work for few hours per day for a week or something, so that won't cost you much when we talk about the total cost of a product, fine. But in case it's inventory, then that's much more, the cost is much more. And same, overall changes in capacity are slow but economical. So if you know that yes, the demand is increasing, so you should start working on just increasing your capacity instead of inventory, because it's more economical. So best used if there is well known long term behavior or trend. For example, if sales increase by 5% every year, then you can expect how much capacity you need to increase the next year. Or if your demand is seasonal, then also you know that how you need to adjust your manpower, your machinery according to that seasonal demand. So these are few of the pros which we can which we consider when we talk about just decoupling fluctuations. So these are the pros. That's why we take capacity as one of the ways to decouple fluctuation. Third way to decouple fluctuation besides like inventory and capacity is time. But to be very honest, time is a default option, right? If you cannot manage to decouple using buffer, that is having extra capacity, inventory or capacity, eventually then somebody has to wait. Either it's your customers or it's your operators or your machines. So it's just a default option, right? Nobody does it by choice. So this is like, if the customer has to wait, this means that demand is larger than the capacity. So obviously if the customer needs the product, so they will have to wait. And in case the demand is less than the capacity, then obviously your operators and machines have to wait, because then you don't need to produce that much. You already have a staff and there is not much of demand. For example, if you want a special Toyota car, maybe a Fortuner, they may ask you to wait for another 1 month, 1.5 months, because they just don't keep on producing and keeping those cars ready, right? They produce them, they just assemble them on demand. But they have that kind of monopoly, they have that kind of a product for which the customer is ready to wait. So but it is least desirable way to decouple fluctuation. So I must tell you that this is not one of the best options to decouple fluctuation, as you don't have to do anything because somebody has to wait, either it's customer or your machines. the cost associated with decoupling through time is actually tricky, right? If operators waste, cost can be calculated. Like if your operators or machines are idle, so you can calculate the cost that okay, this is the cost we have to incur because there is no demand. But in case, so what you can do is that you can, some of the companies here, again I am going to give you example of Toyota, if in case there is a slump or something like that, then they use this time to train their employees. Maybe they just send them for training programs, or they just do certain kind of activities which increase the quality of products and services. So this is how they can use the time. Or some of the companies may even decide that they can just send the employees for a leave or something by giving them half salary. So this is how it's done. But if the customer has to wait, this cost cannot be calculated because you don't know, because the customer can easily go. Now the markets are actually flooded with products, so they can easily go to the other person who is ready, who has the product, so they will take the product from there. Right. So if I have to summarize all these three ways of decoupling the fluctuation, so we have to see that the companies have to use the mix of all three. It's not that you can use only inventory, you can use capacity or the time. You have to see that best mixture, what is the best thing that suits your situation. For example, if it's a short term fluctuation, inventory is a good way, but if you know the demand is long term, it's going to stay, then the capacity is a way to go. And decoupling through time is actually a default resort for companies and useful tools for those companies that can actually afford it, who have a monopoly in the market. But to have a monopoly in a market, your company should have a very good standing, because nowadays competition is so hard that customers actually don't prefer to wait. But we have many tools. So again, now why actually I took this topic before discussing all the lean tools is that we don't have to wait for these fluctuations. We don't have to always think of the methods. Fluctuations would be there, variation would be there, but now we have tools, we have techniques, we are learning Lean Six Sigma, so we have tools which can help us to prevent these fluctuations to occur in the first place. So we have many tools to tackle fluctuations in the first place. Example, by working with small lots or small order sizes. So these are few. I would be talking about 16 more tools which would help you control variation. Then we would be talking about continuous improvement, we would be talking about DMAC. So this is the only reason tackling fluctuation, tackling variation is the reason we are actually going through this course. We are actually learning all these techniques.